From 2011, a coalition of 5 countries, including Britain, the US and France, began military strikes on Libya to prevent further attacks on civilians by Colonel Gaddafi's forces. Pentagon spokesman Vice Admiral William Gortney said Tomahawk missiles were used to target Libyan air defences.
These strikes were carefully coordinated with our coalition partners. The targets themselves were selected based on our collective assessment that these sites either pose a direct threat to the coalition pilots or through use by the regime pose a direct threat to the people of Libya.
The mission eventually led to the downfall of Gaddafi and his killing by rebel troops. A giant explosion halfway across the universe in 2008 became the furthest object ever to be visible to the naked eye. It was a gamma-ray burst caused by the death of a star. This day in 1986, Buckingham Palace announced the engagement of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Exactly 6 years later, it announced they were to separate. The statement broke with normal protocol and expressed the Queen's personal unhappiness about the matter. Bob Dylan released his eponymous first album in 1962. It consisted mainly of old folk songs and didn't receive acclaim until years later. And in 1938, a rugby union match was broadcast on British television for the first time. BBC screened the Calcutta Cup between England and Scotland at Twickenham. Scotland won 21-16. And that brings us to the end of this morning's news briefing. This is BBC Radio 4. It's time for Prayer for the Day, presented by Abbot Mark Ephraim Nolan.
Good morning. Today the Church's calendar commemorates Joseph, the husband of Mary. This man has many things to say to us about humble faith, confident trust in God's providence, and respect for the mystery of the Lord's action in the lives of others, especially those whom we love and care for. Many of us can recall the Gospel story. Mary found herself to be with child by the power of the Holy Spirit. Joseph cannot but have been taken aback at the news of her pregnancy. He knew that the child she bore was not his. He could only assume that Mary had been unfaithful to him. We are told that he decided to break off his engagement with the woman he loved, informally, as inconspicuously as possible, to avoid drawing attention to her in a way that could have caused Mary harm. Then, in a dream, Joseph was let into the secret of God's plan. He was told to take Mary home as his wife, and to name the child to whom she would give birth Emmanuel, a name which means God is with us. Having listened to what was revealed to him in that dream, Joseph understood the child's mother's need for him to stand by her. When Joseph is mentioned in the Gospels after this early episode, it is simply for having been the discreet, unobtrusive character he was, the village carpenter in whose household Jesus grew to maturity. Joseph reminds us that the many low-profile figures were part of our lives, making them all the richer by their gentle presence by our side, people who make it possible for us to do what is asked of us, often at a great personal cost, animated by their selfless love for us. Lord, like Joseph, may we be given the courage and strength to stand by others, to do what is required of us to help them to be and accomplish what is asked of them, whatever this may cost us. Amen.
Prayer for the Day was presented by Abbot Mark Ephraim Nolan. It's just coming up to 6:15, and now Farming Today with Anna Hill.
Good morning. Today, Spanish farmers protest at the EU's Green Deal red tape. Despite the Commission making significant changes to get farmers on its side. We'll hear more about that in just a moment. First, though, we head out to the South Devon coast to Budleigh Salterton, where a new national nature reserve is being established. The Lower Otter estuary is home to Dartford warblers, silver-studded blue butterflies, populations of sea trout, Atlantic salmon and eels. Our environment correspondent Kirk England has this report, starting with Dr. Sam Bridgewater from Clinton Down Estates.
Well, we've created over 50 hectares of intertidal habitat. That's mudflat and salt marsh. And the mudflat is a stuff full of loads of invertebrates. Those in turn act as a food source for many, many species of wading birds. And of course, this kind of habitat is also really important for many species of fish, really important nursery grounds.
This new area of National Nature Reserve will join up with another one further up the valley. Now that's quite different to here, but the idea behind them both is the same, to create a haven for nature. I'm off to meet Nature Reserve Manager Kim Strawbridge.
Always just something different to see, different light, different weather, different seasons. So we've got a whole host of different things, and we've got some really, really specialist species that live here. So down in the Myers, we've got some really rare dragonflies and damselflies, and up on the heaths, we've got some really scarce butterflies as well. So these places really are important for people's health and well-being, and a great place to come and connect with nature. So over there in the distance, you can see the sea shining away, and what we're really looking to do here is connect the heaths here up on the top on the ridge with the sea down there.
More than 1 million people visit these two nature reserves every year.
3, 2, 1,
go! As the plaque was unveiled, I asked the chair of Natural England, Tony Juniper, about why national nature reserves are important.
We need to have more places created for the recovery of nature, and this fantastic project on the lower Otter estuary is really a fine example of that.
Are we doing enough quickly enough when we hear that 1 in 6 species are facing potential extinction?
We need to really up the tempo of action to country. It can be done, but we really need to get on with it.
And some argue those in Westminster are falling short. I put that to Nature Minister Rebecca Powell. Is the government doing enough to help nature bounce back?
Obviously, it's really critical that we help our nature and we restore and protect nature. And that's why actually we have a plan for this. Obviously, restoring nature is difficult and it's going to take a long time. It involves engaging everyone, including all of our farmers. That's why we've got our new environmental land management system that is globally leading, paying farmers with grants to get involved.
Are things going fast enough?
Yes, they are really, really progressing.
People may disagree on that, but one thing there is no argument about is that when it comes to nature, the pressure is on.
BBC Environment correspondent Kirk England in South Devon. The Office for Environmental Protection is investigating whether there's been a failure to comply with the law governing Special Protection Areas, or SPAs, for wild birds in Northern Ireland and England. A similar investigation is being undertaken in Scotland, while in Wales there are concerns about how these sites are being run. SPAs are legally designated sites that protect rare and threatened wild birds. They are internationally important areas for breeding, overwintering and migrating birds. The OEP says it's taking action because the recommendations from a review of these sites between 2015 and 2017 has still not been published. Now this week we're focusing on shellfish. Yesterday we heard about Brexit, trade deals and shellfish stocks. Today we're concentrating on scampi, the tender deep-fried nuggets of langoustine tails which go so well with chips. Well, the UK gets through around £68 million worth of scampi a year, so clearly many people love it. But a conservation group says the current drive to make fishing for langoustine more environmentally friendly has failed. Richard Baines has been finding out more.
Landing the day's langoustine catch at Largs on the Firth of Clyde is Ian White aboard the Aliane.
Port to starboard, we'll put our nice shiny new folder in, please go down on the seabed, sit very, very lightly on the bottom to hold the net down and open.
The langoustine trawling fishery has come in for heavy criticism from environmentalists. They say it damages the seabed, other fish stocks and endangered species. But Ian says things have greatly improved in recent years.
The net, this is the quad end where the catch hopefully will be collected and then lifted into the hopper here. The size of these meshes, the label requirement is 80 millimetres. We work ours to 86, 87 millimetres. We just want the best of the catch. In the Clyde we have very, very little bycatch. Over 20 years ago we designed our nets not to catch fish. The langoustine fishery is
a very clean fishery.
Now he's working to make things better still. Tom Rossiter from the company Safety Net Technologies was on board to trial some of his equipment.
We've developed an underwater camera system to allow the fishermen to see, in most cases for the first time, what's happening down there. But we're also expanding into some of the things you can't see, so your temperature. They want to understand what's going down there, so they can do precision fishing where you can be in the right place at the right time to catch what you need to catch, not catch what you don't want, and reduce the impact your business is having on the environment.
The likes of Ian in the Clyde, you know, he's doing something really quite good.
Nick Underdown is from the conservation charity Open Seas, which is one of the harshest critics of the scampi industry.
But it is just sadly one bit of good practice amongst what is generally a very poorly regulated fishery.
The UK's scampi retailers and processors have created a Fishery Improvement Project, or FIP, which means retailers and processors can say UK langoustines are responsibly sourced.
Supermarkets like Tesco's and Co-op, and Marks and Spencer's, and seafood companies like Whitby Seafoods, as well as government bodies themselves, they've all clubbed together and spent the last 5 years supposedly trying to improve this fishery, but have really achieved nothing. Supermarkets are selling this scampi with responsibly sourced emblazoned on their packaging, but we really think that it's not credible for them to do so.
The FIP project is a step towards Marine Stewardship Council certification. The council says the UK langoustine FIP has been working hard for 5 years to improve sustainability. There's still a lot to do, and it welcomes any efforts towards it. Whoever's right, fishers such as Ian Whiteman say self-interest means langoustine trawlers want real sustainability.
These aren't our oceans, we're just looking after them for the future generation. It's not in our interest to be taking the last prawn. I've got 4 kids. If they want to go into the fishing, we want it there for everybody's use for future generations.
Ian Whiteman ending that report. The British Retail Consortium, which represents the major supermarkets, told us UK retailers were at the forefront of a new agreement between scampi fishermen to adopt the Marine Stewardship Council's new In Transition to MSC programme. This is a vital step in securing the most credible and established sustainability certification scheme possible for scampi. Protesting Spanish farmers in Madrid this weekend, continuing to voice their objections to red tape, despite the European Commission announcing a review of its so-called Green Deal, which was designed to help the EU reach carbon neutrality by 2050. Well, last week the Commission published a raft of proposed changes, which still have to be agreed, but in essence it says it will cut back on red tape, allow individual member states more freedom over complying with new greening rules, and remove the demand that farmers must put a certain percentage of their land over to the environment. Conservationists have criticised the move. The European Commission is hoping the changes will mean it can move forward with its plans. Patrick Pagani is Deputy Secretary General of the European Farmers Cooperative, Copa Cogeca.
The Commission now proposed to grant more flexibility to Member States in implementing a certain number of these conditionality elements, like protecting soil by defining requirements of minimum soil cover, preserve the soil potential for crop rotation, maintain non-productive areas and landscape features. We think it's a good step, it's a first step in the right direction. Of course, the farmers need immediate relief, but these measures are put in place in a coherent way, in a flexible manner, and by all Member States.
How will it affect farmers, though, across Europe? Would the countryside be different under these new proposals than it would be under the Green Deal as originally stated?
This is a very important element. These are targeted modifications to the current CAP proposal. This doesn't question the Green Deal, it doesn't question the objectives of the CAP, which, if we look to the climate elements, there are climate change, environmental care, landscapes. This remains at the core of this current CAP, and it will continue until 2027. But we can always say that sustainability needs to have the three pillars: environment, economic and social. Farmers want to go out and produce. They want to fill paperwork all the time. What is needed, yes, but what is not needed, it shouldn't be put in place.
Do farmers see this change then as a victory?
The victory for farmers is that the 90 million farms have a fair remuneration and a decent remuneration. This will be the victory. So it's a first step. We'll need to see how it is also implemented and when it will be implemented, because there will be new discussions coming on how to implement it.
Environmental campaigners have seen this move as weakening the Green Deal and a backward step for the environment.
This is not the case. Farmers are the first to be impacted by climate change. If you see the consequence on farming for floods that we had in Italy and Slovenia, or the drought that we have in Spain, or in North Europe, they are the first to be impacted, and they are the first to provide solutions. They are the guardians of the territory, of land. This, I think, is important, and this also is the message that when we speak with the public, there is a reconnaissance of the importance of the farmer activity, and also it's in support of them. In support that farmers need to continue their activity. If they don't have a decent income, they will neither manage to do the transitions to the green. When you are red, you can't go green. But this is not the point. The point is to continue the transition. These simplification proposals safeguard agricultural transition, save the possibility also to have a decent income to continue the transition. This is the objective.
But is it right though for farmers to take to the streets to cause massive disruption, to have quite aggressive protests to achieve this?
No, we condemn any degradation or disruptions. It's a difficult balance, but it shows also how farmers are angry. Farmers don't want to go out and protest. They would like ideally to have a decent remuneration of their activities instead of going out in their activity. So I think they're really clear that we support peaceful demonstrations.
Patrick Pagani from Copa Cogeca. That's all we have time for. I'm Anna Hill. The studio manager in Bristol is Caitlin Gaisley, and the producer is Rebecca Rooney.
Katja Adler and Justin Webb will be bringing us the Today programme in a couple of minutes. But first, our tweet of the day. Kelly Turnbull presents an intricately patterned wader, Snipe. The bleating display flight of the snipe has earned it the Gallic name of Galrine Roe, or Little Goat of the Frost. The snipe is an intricately patterned wader, not much bigger than a blackbird, but with an enormously long bill. You'll often see them at the edge of shallow pools, their bills buried up to their eyes in the ooze, probing for worms. When they're disturbed, snipe dash off in a frantic zigzag flight, making a rasping call that sounds like a Wellington boot being sucked from the mud. In spring and summer, snipe perch on posts or hummocks close to their breeding marshes, uttering a loud chipping call. As dusk approaches, they fly on winnowing wings high above their territories before dashing earthwards in an almost kamikaze dive and then sweeping upwards again. And throughout their madcap display, you'll hear this bleating sound. This sound is known as drumming. As the snipe hurtles towards the ground, a weakened hinge in the outer tail feathers causes them to flutter like a flag, producing one of the strangest non-vocal sounds made by any bird. This is BBC Radio 4.
It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday the 19th of March. Good morning, this is Today with Katja Adler and Justin.
The headlines this morning. President Biden has spoken to Israel's Prime Minister for the first time in a month, warning against a major ground assault on Rafah in southern Gaza. Legislation to introduce the first independent regulator on men's elite football in England is being brought to Parliament today. Also in today's programme, The first man convicted of cyber flashing under the new Online Safety Act will be sentenced today. We'll ask if the new law can hope to turn the tide of internet abuse. Age ratings and film classifications like U, PG, 12 and 18 are being redefined to reflect shifting concerns about violence, drug abuse, sex and bad language. And we'll hear some advice from the actor Timothy Chalamet as he prepares to play Bob Dylan, from the director of Bob Dylan Studies at the University of Tulsa.
The trick here is understanding that Bob Dylan is itself a role, or rather a series of roles in constant flux. These include the Woody Guthrie wannabe, the mod rocker who went electric, the Christian revivalist preaching fire and brimstone, and more recently, a roughed-up singer who takes the stage in some forgotten roadhouse at the end of the world.
The BBC News is read by Jane Steele. President Biden has again warned the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that an assault on Rafah in southern Gaza would be a mistake. In the first conversation in a month, the two leaders discussed a plan to send an Israeli delegation to Washington to explain Mr. Netanyahu and his political excessive feeling.
Was killed in an Israeli airstrike last week. He added that other leaders of the group were presumed to be hiding deep in Hamas's network of Gaza, and that the US was helping to ensure that they would be brought to justice. Mr. Sullivan said President Biden, during his call with Benjamin Netanyahu, explained why he was deeply concerned about the prospect of Israel conducting major military operations in Rafah. He said it would lead to more innocent civilian deaths, worse than the already dire humanitarian crisis, and further isolate Israel internationally.
Legislation to impose the first independent regulator on men's football in England is being introduced in Parliament today. The Prime Minister has described the Football Governance Bill as an historic moment for fans. It follows a number of controversies at the top level of the sport. In 2021, 6 Premier League clubs attempted to break away to join the European Super League. Last week, Premier League clubs failed to agree an improved financial package for the rest of the game. Our sports editor Dan Rowling reports.
Last week's collapse of a £900 million deal that would have seen the Premier League share more of its wealth with clubs at lower levels of the game came despite months of pressure from ministers. It now appears to have accelerated the government's plans for the biggest reform of the way the sport is run in England for a generation. More than 2 years after a fan-led review into football governance, the bill confirms its key recommendation, an independent regulator with the power to grant club licences and to impose a financial redistribution settlement if the sports authorities fail to agree one. The Premier League, which is now prioritising new spending rules, said it would study the bill, but some campaigners fear the legislation
rejected all 10 amendments put forward by the House of Lords. The bill aims to give the government the power to deport some asylum seekers to the East African country. Peers will scrutinise the legislation again tomorrow. Our political correspondent Hannah Miller reports.
Last night, the House of Commons repeatedly rejected Lords' amendments that would have made it more difficult to declare Rwanda a safe country, increased protections for victims of modern slavery, and protected migrants who had served the UK overseas. The legislation will now be looked at by peers again. They have the option to reword the changes they would like to see or abandon them entirely. If the Lords choose to bow to the will of the Commons, the law could be on the statute book as soon as this week.
A survey suggests the availability of childcare is falling as costs go up in England, Scotland and Wales. The research by the charity Quorum Family and Childcare suggests that fewer than a third of councils in Britain believe there's enough childcare provision for under-2s in all areas. Government-funded places for the age group in England are due to be expanded from April. Ellen Broom is the head of Quorum.
We are a short while away from a really big expansion of childcare, and obviously that's really concerning that we might not have enough places for every parent who needs them and every child who needs to take one up. What we really want to see is all political parties, whoever forms the next government, to commit to some radical and genuine reform of childcare, so we get a childcare system that works for everyone and no child and no parent misses out.
The English, Scottish and Welsh governments all say they're investing more in early years education. The body, which represents asphalt producers in the UK, has warned that more than half of the local road network in England and Wales could fail in the next 15 years. The Asphalt Industry Alliance says more than 107,000 miles of road would need to be rebuilt in that time, as the cost to fix the backlog reaches a record high of more than £16 billion. The British Board of Film Classification is tightening its rules on violence, sex and bad language in response to its latest audience research. The regulator, which gives films age ratings in the UK, surveyed almost 11,500 people. It says violence, including that of a sexual nature, was the biggest area of concern for audiences. The former newsreader, Natasha Kaplinsky, is the president of the BBFC.
Our job as classifiers is simply to reflect what the public is telling us. It's not to stop people watching films, it's to enable families to make sensible viewing choices. We also provide information alongside the ratings that we give, which alert viewers to what might be coming up in the film.
Natasha Kaplinsky.
Thank you. 6 minutes past 6. Let us alert listeners to what might be coming up in the weather. Simon King not only has the forecast, but knows intimately what is in store for us all. Good morning to you, Simon.
Hello, I do indeed, Justin. Yes, good morning. And I can tell you that actually, while it's probably felt very much like spring for many of us, with temperatures in the mid to high teens, those temperatures are actually above the average for the time of year, about 5 or 6 Celsius above average. By the time we get to Friday and the weekend, those temperatures will come down, and it'll be more typical for the time of year, but it will feel noticeably colder. But that's all to come later in the week. For today, there's quite a bit of cloud out there for southeast and eastern areas of England, some patches of light rain this morning. That's going to mostly clear, and while it'll stay spells later in the afternoon, a few showers possible, and temperatures on that mild side of 15 to 17 degrees. In southwest England, sunny spells will develop through this morning. A few showers are possible, but the cloud will thicken from the southwest later on, with some rain into Cornwall by later this afternoon and this evening. Temperatures of 11 to 14 degrees. For Wales, the Midlands, northwest and northeast England, cloudy with some patches of light rain this morning. Sunny spells developing really quite quickly though through the morning. The odd isolated shower, temperatures of 12 to 15 Celsius. For Northern Ireland today, sunny spells and the odd shower, highs of 10 to 13 degrees Celsius. And across Scotland today, it's pretty cloudy this morning with some rain, especially in western Scotland. Some improvements though after lunchtime, with some drier, sunnier weather coming through, lighter winds developing as well, and temperatures of 9 to 13 degrees Celsius.
Thanks, Simon. It's 8 minutes past 6. Time for a look at this morning's papers and what's on the news websites. The Prime Minister's plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda is the lead in the Times. It reports that the policy could face further delays after Labour promised to oppose it in a crucial vote in the House of Lords tomorrow. If the government is defeated, the paper says this may delay the first flights taking off until June at the earliest. The Express reports that the Prime Minister is still committed to his spring deadline for flights to leave, despite the parliamentary battle over the bill, and says 200 migrants have already been selected to be the first to be deported.
The Telegraph looks ahead to a speech that the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is going to be making later, when she's expected to liken the economic challenge awaiting the next government to that faced by Margaret Thatcher in 1979. The paper says she's going to vow